The Navy SEAL believed he was coming home early to rest. The house looked the same. The street was quiet. The porch light was on. His wife smiled when she opened the door, calm and perfect. But the dog did not step inside. A trained German shepherd froze, ears lifted, body rigid, breathing slow. Fear has a scent, and the dog recognized it instantly. That night, behind a clean kitchen and a convincing smile, a boiling kettle was lifted. An elderly mother trembled in silence, afraid to speak. And in that moment, the son realized something chilling. God had not brought him home early for peace. He was brought home to stop the unthinkable and to save a life. Late autumn lay quietly over Beaufort, South Carolina, the kind of coastal afternoon where the air felt deceptively gentle and the sky held a washed-out blue that softened every sharp edge. A light breeze rolled in from the river, carrying the scent of salt and damp leaves, and the streets of the old town appeared calm enough to lull anyone into believing that nothing truly bad could exist here. Lucas Merritt had learned long ago that calm was often a disguise. The mission had ended 12 hours earlier than planned. No celebration, no dramatic extraction, just a quiet confirmation, a sealed handshake, and a ride back that gave him too much time to think. Lucas didn't call ahead. He rarely did when instinct told him silence was better. Surprise, when handled correctly, revealed more truth than questions ever could. At 37, Lucas Merritt carried himself with the restrained weight of a man shaped by precision and consequence. He was tall, powerfully built, his frame dense rather than bulky, the result of years of training designed to survive rather than impress. His hair was cut short in regulation style, dark brown, threaded with the faintest silver near the temples, and his face bore the permanent stillness of someone who had learned never to reveal more than necessary. Even out of uniform, even behind the wheel of his personal truck, he moved like a Navy SEAL, alert, economical, always prepared for the moment when things went wrong. The gravel drive crunched under his tires as he slowed near the gate. The sound was ordinary, harmless. Lucas shut off the engine and remained still, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening. No voices, no distant music, no doors opening in welcome. The house stood ahead of him, pale against the trees, neat and well kept, a structure that should have meant safety. Lucas felt none. Beside him, Coda stiffened. Coda was a German shepherd, 5 years old, large even for his breed. His coat a deep sable blend of black and dark brown that absorbed the light rather than reflected it. His ears snapped upright, every muscle in his body locking into place as if an invisible switch had been flipped. This was not excitement. This was not curiosity. It was the exact posture Lucas had seen hundreds of times before, in deserts and ruined buildings half a world away. Coda was detecting fear. Not the sharp, immediate fear of a startled animal or a loud noise, but the lingering kind, the kind that seeped into walls, into fabric, into the air itself. Coda's breathing slowed, his chest barely moving as his nose worked carefully, sorting information no human could fully comprehend. He did not bark. He did not move toward the house. He froze, focused, waiting. Lucas felt the shift run straight through his spine. Coda was not a pet. He had never been one. Trained for tactical deployment, Coda had worked alongside Lucas in environments where hesitation meant death. Explosives, hostile movement, chemical residue. Coda had been conditioned to detect threats long before they announced themselves. Over years of shared missions, Lucas had learned that when Coda reacted like this, something was already wrong. Lucas opened the truck door slowly and stepped out. The air outside felt clean at first, touched with river moisture and decaying leaves, but beneath it lingered something else. Faint, sharp, almost metallic. It was subtle enough that most people would never notice it. Coda noticed it immediately. "Easy," Lucas murmured, more out of habit than necessity. Coda stepped down beside him, positioning himself close to Lucas's left leg, not pressing, not seeking reassurance, but aligning. His tail was low, still. His eyes never left the house. Lucas studied the structure with the same methodical calm he brought to unfamiliar compounds overseas. Windows intact, door closed, no obvious signs of disturbance. That was the problem. In his experience, danger rarely announced itself with chaos. The most dangerous situations were often the quietest ones. Lucas had come home expecting stillness. He had not expected tension. The house had always represented a kind of pause in his life, a place meant to be untouched by the realities of his work. He had chosen it deliberately, believing that distance from conflict zones could insulate what mattered most. Standing there now, with Coda rigid at his side, Lucas realized how fragile that belief had been. He took a step forward. Coda did not follow immediately. The dog's stance hardened further, weight shifting subtly backward, a silent warning. Lucas stopped without thinking. Years of training had taught him that when your partner hesitates, you listen. He crouched slightly, resting a hand on Coda's shoulder, feeling the controlled tension beneath his palm. "What do you smell?" Lucas whispered. Coda's ears twitched, his gaze narrowing toward the house, as if tracking something unseen. Fear had a scent, and it had direction. Whatever had left it behind was not gone. It was recent. It was close. Lucas straightened slowly. A memory surfaced uninvited. An operation years earlier, a village that looked peaceful from a distance. Children's shoes neatly lined near a doorway. No signs of struggle. They had almost walked in blind that day. Almost. He exhaled once, steady and controlled. Lucas had survived long enough to know one truth above all others. Safety was not defined by appearance. It was defined by awareness. And awareness, right now, was telling him that the place he had returned to was no longer what he believed it to be. He did not reach for his phone. He did not call out. He did not approach the door. Instead, Lucas stood still beside his dog, eyes fixed on the house, letting the realization settle fully into place. This was not a normal homecoming, and whatever had happened here had happened quietly. Eliza Merritt appeared in the doorway as if she had been waiting for the sound of the engine, her timing too precise to feel accidental. She was 32, tall and slim, with a posture that suggested discipline rather than ease, her shoulders held back, her movements measured. Her dark blonde hair was parted cleanly and fell smoothly past her shoulders, not a strand out of place. She wore a light sweater in a neutral tone and fitted jeans, clothes chosen to signal effortlessness while quietly announcing control. Her face was attractive in a refined way, sharp cheekbones softened by careful makeup, lips curved into a smile that arrived quickly and stayed just a fraction too long. "Lucas," she said, her voice warm, almost musical. "You're home early." The smile did not reach her eyes. Lucas stepped inside, the door closing softly behind him. The air struck him immediately. It was cold, not from weather, but from conditioning, cooled to an exact temperature that felt calculated rather than comfortable. The scent was sharp and clean, citrus layered over something antiseptic, the kind of smell meant to erase traces rather than welcome people. The house looked immaculate. Every surface shone. Furniture sat perfectly aligned. There were no personal items left out, no casual disorder, no sign that anyone truly lived here. Eliza moved closer, her arms lifting as if to embrace him, but she stopped short, adjusting her step so that her body settled squarely between Lucas and the hallway that led deeper into the house. It was subtle. Anyone else might have missed it. Lucas did not. "How was the trip?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, the gesture practiced, familiar. "You must be exhausted." Lucas gave a small nod. His eyes did not linger on her face. They tracked the line of her shoulders, the position of her feet, the angle of her stance. He had learned to read rooms by reading people, and Eliza was blocking more than space. "Where's my mother?" he asked. Eliza's smile tightened, just enough to register. "She's resting. I finally got her to sleep." Coda stepped fully into the house then, his nails clicking softly against the polished floor. He did not look at Eliza. His head remained level, his amber eyes fixed on the hallway behind her. His body was rigid, his tail low and motionless, every muscle alert. He did not bark. He did not growl. He simply stared. Eliza glanced down at him, her expression flickering with something close to irritation before smoothing back into polite tolerance. "He looks tense," she said lightly. "Maybe the drive stressed him." "He's not stressed," Lucas replied. "He's alert." Eliza laughed softly, a sound that felt rehearsed. "He's a dog, Lucas?" Lucas said nothing. He shifted slightly, testing the space. Eliza adjusted with him, maintaining her position without appearing to do so. The hallway behind her remained dark, the door at the far end closed. From that direction came the faintest trace of something sour beneath the sharp cleanliness, a smell Lucas could not quite identify but recognized as wrong. "You don't need to go back there," Eliza said quickly, her voice still gentle. "She had a difficult morning, confusion, agitation. The doctor said rest is critical." Lucas looked at her then, really looked. Eliza had always been composed, but there was a tension in her jaw now, a tightness around her mouth that betrayed effort. She prided herself on control. Something about this moment threatened it. "What doctor?" Lucas asked. Eliza hesitated, only for a heartbeat, but it was enough. "The one I told you about. The specialist." Lucas nodded slowly. He had heard that story before, always vague, always shifting. He stepped sideways, attempting to move past her. Eliza moved with him, her hand lifting instinctively to his arm, fingers light but firm. "Lucas, please," she said. "You'll upset her." Coda's ears angled forward. His gaze sharpened. Lucas stopped. He lowered his eyes briefly to Eliza's hand on his sleeve, then back to her face. "Let go." Her fingers stiffened, then released. She stepped back half a pace, still squarely blocking the hallway, but now her smile had thinned to something brittle. "You don't understand what she's been like," she said. "She gets frightened easily. Loud noises, sudden movement. It's better if you let her rest." The word frightened hung between them, heavy. Lucas turned his attention to the house itself, letting his awareness expand. The walls were too bare, the windows too clean, the silence too complete. This place had been scrubbed not just of dirt, but of life. His gaze dropped briefly to the floor. There were no scuff marks, no clutter, no evidence of someone moving freely through the space. Coda took one slow step forward. Eliza stiffened. "No," she said sharply, the warmth in her voice cracking. "Keep him back." Lucas rested his hand on Coda's collar, not restraining him, simply grounding. "He's trained," Lucas said evenly. "He won't move unless I tell him to." Eliza swallowed. "She's afraid of him," she said. "Animals upset her." Lucas felt something settle into place, cold and precise. His mother, Rosemary, had been a military nurse. She had treated wounded men, comforted soldiers in shock, calmed frightened children. She was not easily unsettled. Fear did not come naturally to her. The hallway seemed to draw Coda's attention more strongly now. His breathing slowed, his body lowering almost imperceptibly, a predator's focus replacing stillness. The smell was stronger there, layered beneath cleaning agents, metallic and sour, laced with something chemical. Lucas took a step closer to Eliza. "Move," he said quietly. Her eyes widened just slightly. "Lucas, don't do this," she said. "You just got home." "That's exactly why I'm doing this." For a moment Eliza did not move. Her composure wavered, the mask slipping enough for something hard to show through. Then, with visible effort, she forced herself to relax, stepping aside just enough to clear a narrow path. "Fine," she said, her tone cool now. "But be gentle." Lucas did not thank her. He moved past, Coda at his side. The hallway was narrow, the light dimmer here, as if deliberately kept that way. The air grew heavier with each step. Coda's focus intensified, his ears flat now, his gaze locked on the closed door ahead. They stopped a few feet from it. Lucas listened. No sound from inside. No movement. He reached for the handle, pausing for a fraction of a second, feeling the familiar surge of readiness that came before breaching unknown spaces. Behind him, Eliza stood perfectly still, her arms folded tightly across her chest. "Lucas," she said, her voice sharp again. "Stop." He ignored her. Coda positioned himself slightly forward, not touching the door, but ready. Lucas turned the handle slowly. It was unlocked. The door opened just enough to release a rush of stale air, heavy with antiseptic, and something else beneath it. Lucas did not step inside yet. He looked back once, meeting Eliza's gaze. Her face was pale now, the smile gone entirely. "This ends now," Lucas said quietly. Coda remained silent, his eyes fixed ahead. Lucas pushed the door open just enough to see inside, and the room greeted him with a stale, breathless stillness that felt sealed off from the rest of the house. The curtains were drawn tight, heavy fabric pressed together to block out the late afternoon light, leaving the space dim and gray. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, layered over something older, something human, as if the room had learned to hold its breath for too long. At first glance, the bed looked untouched. The sheets were smooth, the pillows aligned with unnatural precision, as if sleep itself had been edited out of the space. Lucas took a step forward, his boots barely making a sound on the carpet, and that was when Coda moved. The dog slipped past Lucas in a controlled, deliberate motion and angled left, toward the corner of the room where the shadows pooled deepest. He stopped there, body squared, legs planted wide, head lowered slightly. He did not bark. He did not growl. He stood guard. Lucas followed his line of sight. Rosemary Merritt was not on the bed. She was seated on the floor, wedged into the narrow space between an old armchair and the wall, her body drawn inward as if trying to make itself smaller. She was 69 years old, though in that moment she looked far older. Her once full figure had thinned, her shoulders sloped forward under the weight of something heavier than age. Wisps of silver hair clung loosely around her face, no longer pinned neatly as she had always preferred. She wore a loose long-sleeved shirt and soft pants, both several sizes too large, hanging from her frame as if borrowed from someone else's life. Her hands were wrapped thickly in white bandages, layers upon layers, wound tight from wrist to mid-forearm. The fabric was clean, almost painfully so, but the way she held her arms told a different story. She cradled them close to her chest, fingers curled inward, as if even the air touching her skin might hurt. When Lucas took another step, Rosemary flinched. It was a sharp, involuntary movement, her shoulders jerking, her head snapping up. Her eyes widened instantly, pupils dilated, her gaze darting past Lucas, past Coda, toward the doorway. Fear poured into her expression so quickly it stole her breath. She did not speak. She did not call his name. She only watched the hall behind him, waiting. Lucas felt something crack open in his chest. "Mom," he said softly, lowering himself slightly so he would not loom over her. "It's me." Rosemary's gaze shifted to him then, slow and uncertain, as if recognition had to fight its way through layers of doubt. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, each inhale cautious, like a person afraid of being heard. Coda took a step forward, then another, placing himself squarely between Rosemary and the open doorway. His body formed a solid barrier, broad chest facing outward, back legs braced. The dog's posture was unmistakable. He was protecting. Rosemary noticed him. Her eyes flicked to Coda, and for the first time since Lucas had entered the room, something else appeared beneath the fear. Relief, thin and fragile, trembled through her expression. She reached one bandaged hand toward him without thinking, stopping short as if unsure she was allowed to. "It's okay," Lucas murmured. "He won't hurt you." Coda lowered his head slightly, meeting her gaze, and stayed perfectly still. Rosemary's hand hovered, then rested against the thick fur at his shoulder. The contact made her shudder, a full-body tremor she could not control. She pressed her lips together, swallowing back a sound that might have been a sob. Lucas crouched slowly, keeping his movements measured. He had seen this reaction before, though never from his own mother. This was not simple illness. This was conditioned fear, the kind that rewired instincts, that taught a person to anticipate pain before it arrived. "What happened to you?" Lucas asked quietly. Rosemary shook her head immediately, a small, frantic motion. Her eyes darted again toward the door. Her fingers tightened slightly in Coda's fur. "I'm fine," she whispered. The words sounded rehearsed, worn thin by repetition. "I'm just tired." Lucas followed her gaze. In the doorway stood Eliza. She leaned against the frame, arms folded tightly across her chest, her face composed but pale. The smile she had worn moments earlier was gone, replaced by something cooler, more watchful. She looked at Rosemary first, then at Lucas, her eyes calculating. "She gets confused," Eliza said evenly. "She startles easily now. You shouldn't push her." Rosemary flinched again at the sound of Eliza's voice. It was subtle, a tightening of the shoulders, but Lucas saw it clearly. He rose slowly to his feet, positioning himself slightly in front of his mother, mirroring Coda's stance without thinking. "She's afraid," Lucas said. Eliza exhaled sharply. "She's sick." Rosemary's fingers tightened around Coda's fur. Her head dipped, chin nearly touching her chest. Lucas turned back to his mother, lowering his voice. "Mom, did she hurt you?" Rosemary shook her head again, faster this time. Her lips trembled. "No," she whispered. "I fall sometimes. I'm clumsy." Lucas's jaw tightened. He glanced at the bandages, at the way they were wrapped too evenly, too tightly. He had treated wounds in the field under fire. This was not the work of accident. He reached out slowly, careful not to startle her, and rested his hand lightly over hers. Rosemary froze at the contact, her breath catching, but she did not pull away. Instead, her eyes filled, tears gathering without falling. "You don't have to be scared," Lucas said. Rosemary's gaze flicked to Eliza again, panic rising visibly. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "Please," she whispered, "I don't want to make trouble." The words hit Lucas harder than anything he had seen so far. Behind him, Coda shifted his weight, pressing more firmly into his stance. The dog's body was rigid now, a quiet promise of defense. He did not look at Lucas. His attention remained fixed on Eliza, ears angled forward, eyes unblinking. Eliza noticed. Her composure cracked just enough to reveal irritation. "This is unnecessary," she said. "You're upsetting her." Lucas straightened, turning to face her fully. "You're the one she's afraid of." "That's absurd," Eliza snapped, then caught herself. She forced a small smile, brittle and strained. "She doesn't understand what's happening to her. She imagines things." Rosemary let out a soft sound, barely audible, and curled further into herself. Lucas felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. He had seen lies dressed up as concern before. He had seen authority used to silence weakness. He crouched again, bringing himself level with his mother. "Mom," he said gently, "look at me." It took effort, but Rosemary lifted her head. Her eyes were still wide, still frightened, but beneath the fear was something else now. Recognition, trust, fragile but present. "I'm here," Lucas said. "You're not alone." Rosemary nodded faintly. Tears finally slipped free, tracking down the lines of her face. She did not speak, but her hand tightened around his. Behind them, Coda remained unmoving, a silent sentinel. Lucas rose once more, his body subtly repositioning to block Eliza's view of his mother. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply stood there, unyielding. "This conversation isn't over," he said calmly. Eliza stared at him, her jaw clenched, eyes flashing with something close to anger before she masked it again. She turned away abruptly, heels clicking softly as she retreated down the hall. The room fell silent again. Lucas knelt beside his mother, his hand steady over hers, while Coda held his ground between them and the door. In that quiet, sealed space, Lucas understood the truth fully for the first time. His mother had not been resting. She had been surviving. Dinner was served with a precision that felt rehearsed. The table in the dining room had been set hours in advance, plates aligned evenly, silverware polished to a mirror shine, napkins folded into careful triangles. A low chandelier cast a warm, flattering light that softened the angles of the room, as if beauty itself were being used as insulation against scrutiny. The smell of roasted chicken and herbs drifted through the air, layered over the ever-present trace of citrus cleaner that clung to the house like a second skin. Eliza moved through the space with calm efficiency, placing dishes down with controlled grace. She looked composed, almost serene, her posture straight, her movements economical. To an outsider, she would have appeared devoted, tireless, the picture of a woman carrying an unfair burden with quiet strength. Lucas watched her closely, noticing how she never turned her back fully to the hallway, how her eyes flicked occasionally toward the doorway, as if measuring distance rather than comfort. Rosemary sat at the table with her hands folded in her lap, shoulders hunched inward. She had been guided into the chair by Eliza moments earlier, not roughly, but with a firm insistence that left no room for refusal. The sleeves of her loose sweater had been tugged down to cover her bandages completely. She did not look at the food. Her gaze remained fixed on the wood grain of the table, following the lines as though they might lead her somewhere safer. Lucas took the seat beside his mother, close enough that his knee brushed hers. He noticed the way she stiffened at first, then relaxed slightly when she realized it was him. Coda lay down at Lucas's feet, his body angled toward Rosemary, head lifted, eyes tracking Eliza's movements with steady vigilance. "You must be starving," Eliza said lightly, setting a plate in front of Lucas. "Long missions never come with decent meals." Lucas nodded, picking up his fork without eating. "You mentioned a doctor earlier," he said. "What exactly did they diagnose?" Eliza paused just long enough to seem thoughtful rather than hesitant. She sat across from them, folding her hands neatly. "It's complicated," she said. "Rare conditions usually are." Her tone softened, tinged with practiced concern. "Her skin reacts violently to certain environmental triggers. The specialists think it's an autoimmune response aggravated by stress and age." Rosemary flinched at the word aggravated. Her fingers tightened briefly in her lap. Eliza continued, warming to the story. "The inflammation gets worse if it isn't managed carefully. That's why the bandages are necessary. And then there's the cognitive decline." She sighed, shaking her head gently. "It started with small things, forgetting names, misplacing objects. But lately she's been frightened, paranoid. She imagines threats where there are none." Lucas's eyes moved to his mother's covered arms. "What kind of treatment?" "Topical solutions," Eliza replied smoothly. "Very specialized. The doctor said conventional medicine hasn't caught up yet. It requires diligence, precision." Lucas finally looked at her. "And the burns?" Eliza's expression didn't change. "Lesions," she corrected. The skin breaks down when the inflammation spikes. Lucas leaned back slightly, studying her face. He had interrogated men under far harsher conditions than a dinner table. Lies had patterns. They always did. Eliza's story flowed too cleanly, too smoothly, every answer already shaped to deflect further questions. He turned his attention back to Rosemary. "Mom," he said gently, "does it hurt?" Rosemary's shoulders rose and fell in a shallow breath. She glanced at Eliza, then back at the table. "I'm managing," she whispered. Lucas reached for his glass, buying time. Years in the field had taught him to read wounds, to recognize damage beneath bandages and bravado. Chemical burns behaved differently than rashes. They blistered in specific ways. They carried a smell, faint but unmistakable, that lingered even after cleaning. He had smelled it earlier in the hallway. He smelled it now, beneath the food, beneath the polish. Eliza watched him closely. "You should eat," she said. "It's still warm." Instead, Lucas reached slowly for the edge of Rosemary's sleeve. "Let me see," he said. Rosemary froze. Her breath caught, a soft, panicked sound escaping before she could stop it. "No," she whispered. Eliza's chair scraped softly against the floor as she leaned forward. "Lucas, that's not a good idea. The skin is extremely sensitive. You could cause damage." Lucas did not look at her. He kept his voice low, steady. "I won't hurt you," he said to his mother. Rosemary's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head faintly, fear etched into every line of her face. Lucas felt his resolve harden. He slid his fingers beneath the cuff of her sleeve and lifted it just enough to see. The bandages were wrapped too tightly, compressed in uniform layers that dug into the flesh beneath. Where the fabric met skin, the exposed edge was angry and raw, a deep red that faded into an unnatural pallor. It was not inflamed in patches the way a rash would be. It was burned, the skin damaged evenly, deliberately. Lucas inhaled slowly. Eliza stood abruptly. "That's enough," she said, the warmth draining from her voice. "You're upsetting her." Lucas released his mother's sleeve carefully. Rosemary sagged in relief, her shoulders trembling. He looked up at Eliza, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't an autoimmune condition," he said quietly. Eliza's lips pressed together. "You're not a doctor." "I've treated chemical burns under fire," Lucas replied. "I know what they look like." Silence settled over the table, heavy and suffocating. Coda shifted slightly, his muscles tensing, his eyes never leaving Eliza. Eliza forced a laugh that sounded thin even to her own ears. "You're overreacting. Stress does strange things to people." Lucas leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "So does sodium hydroxide," he said calmly. Rosemary gasped softly, her head snapping up. Eliza's face drained of color for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "You don't know what you're talking about," Eliza said sharply. Lucas stood. "Dinner's over." He moved to his mother's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Rosemary leaned into the contact without realizing it, exhaustion and fear weighing her down. Coda rose immediately, positioning himself between Lucas and Eliza. Eliza stared at them, her jaw clenched, eyes flashing with something cold and resentful. "You think you understand what it takes to care for her," she said. "You disappear for months and then judge me over one meal." Lucas met her gaze. "This story you're telling," he said evenly, "it's too perfect." He guided Rosemary gently from the table, Coda close at their heels. Eliza remained standing, rigid, watching them leave, the untouched dinner cooling between them. Lucas knew one thing with absolute certainty now. Whatever was happening to his mother was not illness. It was intention. Night settled over the house with a quiet finality, the kind that pressed inward rather than easing the day away. Lucas waited until the lights dimmed and the sounds of movement upstairs thinned into stillness. Years of operating in hostile territory had taught him patience. He moved through the house the way he always had when the stakes were high, deliberately, leaving no trace of his passing. The study sat at the back of the house, a small room Eliza had converted into her workspace. It was spotless like everything else she touched, but here the cleanliness had a different purpose. The desk faced the wall, the chair aligned precisely, cables tucked away so neatly they were almost invisible. A ring light stood folded in the corner, its white surface reflecting faintly in the glow of a desk lamp. Lucas paused just inside the doorway, scanning the room as if it might move against him. Coda remained in the hall, lying down but alert, his chin resting on his paws, ears angled forward. He was quiet, a presence Lucas trusted more than any lock or alarm. Lucas sat at the desk and powered on the laptop. The screen flickered to life without a password prompt. That alone told him more than Eliza ever had. She trusted this space because she believed no one would look too closely. The desktop was immaculate, folders labeled with bland efficiency. Lucas opened the browser and felt his jaw tighten as the page loaded. Eliza's face filled the screen, softly lit, her expression gentle and tired in a way Lucas had never seen in person. She wore neutral colors, hair pulled back loosely, makeup minimal. It was a different version of her, crafted carefully for an audience she had never mentioned. The video was a live stream recording. Eliza sat framed by the same wall Lucas now faced, though dressed differently, the ring light positioned just out of view to cast flattering shadows. Her voice was low, warm, measured. She spoke of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of the quiet strength it took to care for an aging parent. "My mother-in-law is very ill," she said, hands folded, eyes glistening. "It's a rare condition. The doctors don't fully understand it yet." Lucas felt something cold settle behind his ribs. She continued, describing Rosemary's supposed decline with careful detail. Confusion, fear, fragile skin, experimental treatments. Each phrase was chosen to evoke sympathy without inviting scrutiny. As she spoke, images appeared beside the video. A bandaged hand resting on a blanket. A blurred shot of an elderly figure in a chair, head bowed. Lucas recognized the sleeve, the angle of the arm. He had seen that exact moment earlier that evening. The donation counter ticked upward steadily. Lucas scrolled. There were dozens of posts, months of them, documenting a slow, tragic narrative arc. The language was consistent, the tone unwavering. Every update emphasized urgency, isolation, the lack of institutional support. Followers commented with prayers and encouragement. Some shared stories of their own parents, their own losses. Many donated, small amounts, large ones, again and again. Lucas opened the financial summary. The numbers made his stomach twist. Tens of thousands of dollars raised over time, routed through a private payment service into an account registered solely in Eliza's name. He checked the medical documentation linked to the page. There was nothing there, no clinic names, no physician signatures, no hospital records, only vague references to specialists and alternative care. Lucas searched locally, then expanded outward. There were no appointments logged under Rosemary's name, no prescriptions beyond over-the-counter supplies, no claims filed, nothing. This was not care. This was theater. A sound from the doorway made him turn. Margaret Lane stood there, frozen, one hand gripping the doorframe. She was in her late 40s, average height, with a lean build shaped by long hours on her feet. Her dark hair was pulled into a low ponytail, strands already streaked with gray despite her age. Margaret was Eliza's cousin, a woman who had lived nearby for years and helped occasionally with errands. She dressed simply, jeans and a worn jacket, and her face carried the guarded weariness of someone who had learned not to ask questions too loudly. "I didn't know you were still up," she said softly. Lucas closed the laptop halfway, but did not stand. "I didn't know anyone else came by this late." Margaret shifted her weight, eyes flicking to the screen, then away. "Eliza asked me to drop off some groceries. She said your mother needed special food." Lucas studied her. Margaret's hands were rough, her nails unpolished. She looked uncomfortable, like a person standing in the wrong room. "Did you ever see a doctor come here?" he asked. Margaret hesitated. "She said it was all handled remotely." Lucas nodded. "Did you ever see my mother unbandaged?" Margaret swallowed. "No." Her voice held something else beneath the words: doubt, unease, guilt. "She doesn't let people ask questions," Margaret added quietly. "Not really. She says it upsets Rosemary." Lucas closed the laptop fully now. "It should." Margaret looked at him, something like relief flickering across her face before fear reclaimed it. "I thought it was strange," she admitted. "But Eliza always had an answer, and your mother never contradicted her." Lucas stood. "Because she's afraid." Margaret's shoulders sagged. "I didn't want to believe that." Lucas walked past her into the hall. Coda rose immediately, his eyes briefly meeting Margaret's. She startled at his size but did not step back. "He won't hurt you," Lucas said. "He's here to protect." Margaret nodded slowly. "I hope so." Upstairs, the house remained silent. Lucas returned to the living room and sat in the dark, piecing the pattern together with the same precision he once used to map enemy movement. The live streams followed a schedule. The posts escalated whenever donations slowed. The images grew more dramatic over time. Pain was currency. Fear was leverage. Eliza had built a second life in plain sight, broadcasting suffering while manufacturing it behind closed doors. Lucas looked at Coda, who sat beside him now, his posture calm but attentive. "We do this right," Lucas murmured. "No noise, no mistakes." Coda's ears flicked in acknowledgement. Lucas returned to the study briefly, copying files onto a secure drive, documenting dates, amounts, screenshots. He did not delete anything. He wanted the evidence intact. He wanted it undeniable. When he finished, he shut down the laptop and restored everything exactly as he had found it. Eliza's world depended on illusion. Lucas would not disturb it yet. As he turned off the light, Lucas understood something with absolute clarity. This was not neglect. It was not ignorance. It was exploitation, methodical and sustained. The story Eliza told the world was perfect because it had been rehearsed, because it was profitable, because it required silence to survive. And silence, Lucas knew, could be broken. Lucas waited until the house settled into its artificial version of sleep. Eliza's footsteps faded upstairs, her door closing with a soft, deliberate click that sounded more like punctuation than rest. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was controlled. Lucas sat in the living room with the lights off, the faint glow from the street leaking through the blinds in thin, horizontal lines. Coda lay beside him, alert but calm, his breathing slow, ears shifting subtly with every sound the house made. When the moment felt right, Lucas stood and clipped a short lead onto Coda's collar, not to restrain him, but to guide him. He crouched slightly and spoke in a low voice that carried no emotion, only intent. "Search!" Coda rose instantly, his body changing as if a switch had been thrown. The relaxed companion vanished, replaced by the working dog Lucas had trusted with his life in hostile territory. Coda was 5 years old, a large German shepherd with a sable coat darkened along the spine, powerful shoulders, and a scar just above his left eye from shrapnel years earlier. His training had been honed through combat zones and collapsed buildings, environments where danger hid in plain sight. Tonight, the house felt no different. Coda moved first through the kitchen, nose low, methodical. He ignored the obvious spaces, the cabinets, the counters, the places Eliza wanted people to look. His tail remained level, his pace steady. He paused briefly near the sink, sneezed once, and moved on, as if dismissing a false trail. Lucas followed at a distance, watching not just where Coda went, but where he did not. The dog bypassed the guest bathroom, the laundry room, even the study Lucas had already searched. His focus narrowed as he approached the hallway near the stairs. There was a small door beneath the staircase, painted the same neutral white as the wall around it. From a distance it blended seamlessly, designed to disappear. Coda stopped in front of it, nose pressed close to the crack at the bottom. He inhaled sharply, then backed up half a step, and sat. Lucas's pulse slowed. That was the signal. He opened the door. Inside was a narrow storage space, dim and cool, filled with winter coats, plastic bins, and neatly stacked boxes labeled with careful handwriting. Holiday decorations, old shoes, nothing that looked suspicious at first glance. Lucas knelt and let Coda continue. The dog moved past the coats, ignoring fabric and dust, and went straight to the back wall. He sniffed once, twice, then pawed at the base of a large plastic bin marked cleaning supplies. The bin slid forward with a soft scrape. Behind it was another panel. Lucas ran his fingers along the seam. It was flush with the wall, painted over, the edges disguised with care. He pressed gently, and the panel gave way with a quiet click, revealing a shallow recess hidden behind the drywall. The smell hit him immediately. It was sharp and caustic, strong enough to sting the back of his throat even before he leaned closer. Coda recoiled instantly, sneezing hard, his head shaking as he backed away. His reaction was immediate and unmistakable. This was not rot. This was not mold. This was chemical. Lucas pulled on gloves from his pocket and reached into the recess. Inside were several industrial containers, unlabeled on the front, but unmistakable by shape and weight. One had residue crusted around the cap, a pale, chalky substance that flaked under his touch. Another carried a faint, oily sheen that caught the light. He recognized them from past operations. Degreasers, solvents. Corrosive agents used to strip metal and clean machinery. Not something that belonged in a home, not something that belonged anywhere near human skin. On the top shelf of the recess sat a notebook. It was black, unassuming, the kind sold at any office supply store. Lucas lifted it carefully and opened the cover. The pages inside were filled edge to edge with neat handwriting, organized, precise. Dates were listed down the left margin. Measurements followed. Times. Notes. Applied solution at Aero 800. Increased concentration. Reaction delayed. Visible blistering by afternoon. Lucas turned the page. Pain response stronger today. Vocalization lasted longer. Capture images after redness peaks. His hand tightened around the spine of the notebook. This was not improvisation. This was planning. He flipped through more pages. The pattern was unmistakable. When donations slowed, the entries intensified. Higher concentrations, longer exposure. Notes about lighting, about angles, about timing posts to maximize engagement. There were even reminders written in the margins. Avoid hands on camera unless wrapped. Keep subject fatigued. Sedation effective. Lucas closed the notebook slowly. Behind him, Coda had settled again, though his ears remained pinned slightly back, discomfort lingering from the fumes. Lucas reached out and rested a hand on the dog's neck, grounding both of them. This wasn't neglect, Lucas said quietly. This was production. He replaced the notebook exactly where he had found it, then carefully returned each container to its position. The panel slid back into place with a soft click, disappearing once more behind the illusion of normalcy. The bin was moved back, the coats hung undisturbed. Lucas stepped back, surveying the space. To anyone else, it was just storage. To him, it was a crime scene. He led Coda back into the hallway and closed the door beneath the stairs. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked faintly. then went still. Eliza remained unaware. Lucas returned to the living room and sat in the dark again, the notebook's words replaying in his mind. Rosemary's fear was no longer a mystery. Her silence was not confusion. It was survival. Pain had been scheduled. Suffering had been documented. Her body had been turned into content. Coda lay beside him, pressing his flank lightly against Lucas's leg, a quiet reminder that he was not alone in this. Lucas did not act yet. He knew better. Truth like this required timing, precision. One mistake would give Eliza space to destroy everything he had just seen. But now he had it. The proof. And the certainty that what was happening in this house was not illness, not care, not misunderstanding. It was exploitation, engineered and recorded, hidden behind clean walls and perfect smiles. Lucas left just before night fully settled, his departure deliberate enough to be convincing. He told Eliza a task had come through, a short-notice operation that required him to be gone until morning. His tone was casual, practiced, the same tone he had used dozens of times before deployments. Eliza accepted it too easily. She stood by the door, composed, offering concern that sounded rehearsed, her relief slipping through the cracks of her calm the moment she thought he had turned away. Lucas drove off, waited until the house disappeared behind a bend in the road, then cut the engine and circled back on foot with Coda at his side, the night air cool and still around them. They reached the back of the house well after midnight. The lights inside were on, bright and harsh against the darkness. Lucas crouched near the old sliding glass door, its frame worn from years of use, its lock outdated, the weakness obvious to someone trained to see structural failure points. He parted the blind just enough to look inside. The kitchen was washed in white light. Eliza stood near the counter, her posture rigid, hair pulled back tight, her movements precise and devoid of warmth. In her hand was a stainless steel kettle, steam rising steadily from its spout. The water had reached a full boil. Rosemary stood a few steps away, smaller than Lucas remembered her, shoulders rounded, her bandaged hands held close to her chest. She was trembling, her fear visible even from a distance. Eliza spoke calmly, almost gently, as if this were a ritual rather than violence. She told Rosemary to hold out her hands, to stay still, to let the pain cleanse what she called weakness and impurity. Rosemary shook her head, whispering pleas that never rose above the hiss of steam. Eliza stepped closer, lifting the kettle higher, angling it toward the exposed bandages. Lucas felt the moment narrow, time compressing into a single breath. "Now," he said, voice low and absolute. Coda launched forward instantly, all restraint gone. Lucas drove his shoulder into the sliding door at the precise weak point, the aged frame giving way with a sharp crack as the glass burst inward. The door flew off its track, shattering across the floor. Before Eliza could react, Coda crossed the kitchen in a heartbeat, slamming into her with controlled force, knocking her backward and off balance. The kettle tore from her grip, crashing against the counter before spilling boiling water across the tiles. Steam exploded upward, the scalding liquid spreading across the floor, but stopping short of Rosemary's feet. Eliza hit the ground hard, the air ripped from her lungs. Coda landed on her chest, pinning her there, his weight unyielding, his growl low and steady, a warning that needed no translation. Lucas rushed to Rosemary, pulling her away from the heat and broken glass, wrapping his arms around her as her body collapsed into his. She was shaking uncontrollably, sobbing now, the sound raw and unguarded. Lucas shielded her with his body, one hand firm on her back, his voice steady in her ear, telling her she was safe, that it was over, that she was no longer alone. Behind them, Eliza struggled once, then froze as Coda's jaws snapped inches from her face, precise and restrained. Lucas stood, his expression stripped of hesitation, and moved to restrain her, securing her wrists, while Coda maintained pressure until the threat was fully neutralized. Eliza said nothing now. The moment had passed. Control was gone. Lucas returned to Rosemary, kneeling beside her, his presence solid and real. She clung to him as if letting go might pull her back into the nightmare. Outside, the night remained quiet, but inside the house, everything had changed. The violence had been stopped at the last possible second, the breaking point reached and shattered. Rosemary was alive. And the silence that had protected Eliza for so long was finally broken. The sirens arrived quietly at first, distant and restrained, then closer, folding the street in red and blue light that pulsed against the quiet suburban night. Lucas stood in the kitchen with one arm wrapped around Rosemary, his body still positioned between her and Eliza, as if danger might reappear by force of habit alone. Coda sat at his heel, posture steady, ears alert, his dark eyes never leaving Eliza, even after the restraints were secured. The first responders entered with controlled urgency. 2 police officers moved toward Eliza, their expressions hardening as they took in the shattered glass, the spilled kettle, the chemical smell lingering in the air. Eliza said nothing as she was lifted to her feet. Her robe was stained, her hair disheveled, her composure finally stripped away. She looked smaller now, diminished, the carefully curated authority gone. The officers read her charges calmly. Domestic abuse, aggravated assault, evidence of torture, federal wire fraud. The words landed heavily, final and irreversible. EMS followed close behind. A woman named Karen Holloway led the medical team. She was in her early 40s, tall with a sturdy build, her brown hair pulled into a practical braid. Her face carried the calm competence of someone who had seen too much pain to be rattled by it. She knelt in front of Rosemary, lowering herself to eye level before speaking, explaining each step before touching her. Rosemary flinched at first, then relaxed when Karen waited, patient and unhurried. "You're safe now," Karen said gently. "We're here to help you." Rosemary nodded faintly. Her hands still trembled, but she allowed the bandages to be assessed. Lucas stayed close, his hand never leaving her shoulder. Coda shifted nearer, pressing his flank lightly against her leg. The contact steadied her more than words could. As Eliza was led out of the house, she turned once, her eyes flicking to Rosemary. There was no apology there, no regret, only calculation, already searching for angles that no longer existed. The door closed behind her with a sound that felt like punctuation, ending a long, cruel sentence. The house fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. It no longer pressed inward. It loosened. In the weeks that followed, the truth unfolded publicly. The evidence Lucas had gathered left no room for doubt. The hidden chemicals, the detailed notebook, the financial records. Each piece fit together with brutal clarity. Eliza's online accounts were frozen, the donations were traced, federal charges were filed. The narrative she had sold collapsed under its own weight. Rosemary was moved temporarily to a recovery center, a place filled with light and open windows where doors were never locked without reason. Her healing was slow and uneven. The physical wounds faded faster than the fear. There were nights when she woke shaking, moments when sudden sounds made her heart race. Lucas was there for all of it. He took leave without hesitation. No uniform, no deployments, just quiet days, repeated gently until they began to feel real again. Coda became part of her routine. Every morning he waited patiently while Rosemary shuffled to the patio, his pace matched to hers. He lay beside her chair as she rested, his presence constant and grounding. At first she touched him tentatively, fingers brushing his fur as if testing permission. Over time her hand lingered longer, her strokes more confident. She began to smile again, small at first, then without thinking. Months later, autumn returned to the neighborhood with soft gold light and cool air that smelled of leaves and clean beginnings. Rosemary sat on the front porch wrapped in a light cardigan, the bandages long gone, faint scars visible on her arms, but no longer hidden. She ran her hand slowly along Coda's broad back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. The dog lay at her feet, relaxed now, no longer on guard, his work done. Lucas sat nearby on the porch steps, a mug cooling in his hands. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a worn jacket, his hair grown slightly longer, without the discipline of regulation cuts. For the first time in years, there was nowhere he needed to be. Rosemary looked at him, her eyes clear. "You brought me back," she said quietly. Lucas shook his head. "You held on." She smiled, resting her hand again on Coda's fur. "You both did." The house behind them no longer smelled of chemicals or fear. The windows were open, light moved freely through the rooms. It was no longer a place of silence, but of ordinary sounds. Cups in the sink, footsteps on wood. Life unedited. Lucas leaned back, letting the moment settle. There were no missions waiting, no alarms, just the simple certainty that his mother was safe, that the darkness had been named and removed, and that what remained was something gentler. For the first time since coming home, the light stayed. This story reminds us that evil rarely announces itself with noise. It hides behind smiles, clean rooms, and convincing words. It survives in silence, but silence is never stronger than truth. When Lucas listened to his instincts, and when Coda trusted what he sensed, light broke through the darkness. That is not coincidence. That is grace. Sometimes God does not send thunder or fire. Sometimes He sends a quiet warning in your heart. Sometimes He sends a loyal companion who sees what you cannot. Sometimes He gives you the courage to look closer when everything looks fine on the surface. Miracles do not always look like sudden rescue. Often they look like discernment, timing, and the strength to act before it is too late. In our daily lives, there may be people around us who are suffering quietly. The elderly, the weak, the ones who do not know how to ask for help. This story calls us to pay attention, to trust that feeling when something feels wrong, to be present, to be a protector when God places someone in our care. If this story touched your heart, let it move you to action. Share it with someone who needs encouragement. Leave a comment to let others know they are not alone. Subscribe to the channel so more stories of truth, justice, and hope can reach those who need them. And now a short prayer for you. May God watch over your home. May He give you eyes to see truth and a heart brave enough to act on it. May He protect the vulnerable in your life and place faithful guardians around you. May light always return, even after the darkest night. If you receive this blessing and stand in faith, please comment Amen.